Good evening. Today is a special session on August 11th, 2022. And before I call the meeting to order, I want to announce that we have individuals attending remotely as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should mute their phones when not speaking to avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak, so the public that is participating knows exactly who's speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and the current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General. I will now call this meeting to order, and I'll ask the clerk to announce this meeting and give us a roll call, please.
Good evening. You are hereby notified that I have called a special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, to be conducted in a hybrid format on Thursday, August 11th, 2022 at 4 p.m. in the 5th floor conference room of the Municipal Office Building for a presentation from the Fairfax Industrial Association, followed by a budget workshop. Roll call. Johnson. Payne, we have an absence memo. Markley.
Here.
Stites.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Bynum.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan.
Here.
Ramirez.
Here.
Garner.
Here. Tonight, we have two items on our agenda. The first item is a presentation from the Fairfax Industrial Association. Glad to have them with us here tonight. And I'll recognize Melissa Clark, the Executive Director of the Fairfax Industrial Association, for her presentation.
Reintroduce myself. I'm Melissa Clark, Executive Director of the Fairfax Association. We do have a slide presentation. Okay. And then I'll scroll through it. Is this the way it's going to work? Sorry, guys. Okay. So once again, I'm Melissa. I'm the Executive Director of the Fairfax Association. I also have a business in Fairfax that I've had down there for 30 years. I've been on the board for a long time, over 25 probably. I've done every officer position and I'm the director currently. Many of you are probably familiar with the Fairfax District and Fairfax Industrial Association, FIA. It was formed in 1951 by business owners to protect the interests of Fairfax District. We have monthly board meetings and luncheons. Are you guys hearing me okay? Okay. An annual Fairfax Festival at Cobb Point Park with attendance over 500, as well as partnering with various Wyandotte County community groups. I want to thank you all for allowing me to make this presentation to you during your very busy budget session. And thank you for serving as commissioners. I also want to mention special thanks to our District Commissioner, Gail Townsend, who's on the Zoom, and our at-large District Commissioner, Melissa Bynum. And there's going to be some typos. I'm sorry, my dad had surgery the other day and it was a little more challenging than we thought. So I was a little short on time. But this is kind of just briefly what I'm going to go through is our 100-year anniversary, our top 3 concerns, recent accomplishments, and if you have any questions and answers. So Fairfax is 100 years old this year. We're excited to be celebrating the 100-year anniversary. We are believed to be the first industrial plan district in the country, which means that we're also the oldest industrial district in the country. Thank you to the Unified Government for their centennial $10,000 support for our historical year. FIA has raised over $140,000 in sponsorships to put on celebrations for this throughout the year. We have 6 events and we've already had a few, but we have more coming. And I have these flyers back there on the desk if anyone wants to grab them, because we would love to get everyone's participation as much as possible in celebrating. At the beginning of May, we had a ribbon cutting of the Fairfax Towers, which is our first ever entrance signage for the district. It just took us 99 years to get it done, but it looks awesome and we're super excited about it. There is a 3-month display at the Wyandotte County Museum, which is of our 100-year history as a district. We had a Fairfax family night at the Monarchs. Thank you for offering this unified government suite, which we used. We also set the record for the highest group attendance at 519. Next week, we have a 100-year anniversary luncheon with Esther George, who's president of the Federal Reserve Bank at the Truman Library. This is a sold-out event. We will be releasing I put 8-minute, but it's a 10-minute historical video that we've been working on with part of this anniversary to capture the history of our district and keep it for years to come. You're going to see a 2-minute clip of it here shortly. In September, we're going to be back at the Wyandotte County Museum with a luncheon and showcasing the 100-year exhibit, and there will be a panel discussion of Fairfax history. October 6th is our Fairfax Festival. That's going to be our final big event. We expect over 600 to attend. There will be 2 bands, food, beer and wine garden, lawn game tourney, anniversary t-shirts, koozies, swag bags, a fireworks display over the river, which will commence our 100-year celebration. So please keep an eye out for that. And the tickets will be going on sale soon. They're like $15 and you get all the food and drink and all the other stuff that's in that. So it's a good deal and it's a good time. So hopefully you can attend. At this point, I want to show the clip. I think that Monica is going to help me.
Years of history of making products. Folks don't understand what's happening on the street village level. What's happening is making products in the community. That's where it's area that for a long time with the marshy farmland, it wasn't really seen as a point to develop and then they must be moving and at it and thought about it differently and it was never available and also was not available.
Fairfax is impacting the war effort wasn't limited to production of training and boats. For the first time in U.S. history, women were making a difference in the world. Everything about Fairfax is studied. Almost lost in 1951. Out of 1951, forever changed the industry and all of its different. Fairfax persevered, retooling, and reinventing itself. Fairfax is represented by industry that's diverse as Canada, printing, furniture systems, security systems, automotive, fiberland, house, healthcare.
Need somebody and I believe we're going to need to talk.
Fairfax not only want to each other. Yet the city, Kansas, and Wyandotte County. Now.
So that's, oops, Greg's talking again. I know he's here somewhere. So that's a 2-minute clip of the 10-minute. The 10-minute video is a little different, but we're really excited to have it and to be able to capture that history of our district. Okay, so Fairfax Proud. Currently, Fairfax houses over 135 businesses. We employ over 10,000 people and generate over $5.4 billion in annual sales. We have world famous brands, including Kellogg's. 85% of your Cheez-Its are made there for the world. So it's kind of a big deal because we cannot not have Cheez-Its. CertainTeed is the world's largest fiberglass plant. Owens Corning also makes fiberglass in the Fairfax General Motors stamping and assembly plant. Despite appearance, Fairfax has almost zero vacancy. And as Greg Kendall mentioned in the video, behind these nondescript box buildings with logos, we are making products all of us use each and every day. Between the two pipeline companies, Magellan and ConocoPhillips, we supply 95% of the Kansas City metropolitan area's unleaded and diesel gas, and 100% of the jet fuel comes out of Fairfax. The Fairfax Drainage District protects Fairfax's over $5 billion in investment with a 5 million long levee, flood wall, and flood control along the Missouri River. The Fairfax District embraces 2,000 acres in a central location of the Kansas City metro area. Next, I'm just going to talk about our top 3 concerns as a district and association. This has been on this item has been on a list since I probably started on the board. We would like to work with the city to develop a fair percentage return in our reinvestment on Fairfax dollars. Not expecting that to happen right now, but maybe by next year. Fairfax was annexed by KCK in 1951. The Fairfax Industrial Association was formed that same year by Fairfax business owners because they feared annexation by the city of KCK would result in extraction of tax dollars without equitable reinvestment toward improvements and maintenance. This is still a concern today. We would like to set up a committee with the unified government to talk about what kind of percentage is a fair percentage of reinvestment back of our tax dollars into our district. Currently, there's a one-line item that we were able to get worked out about 10 years ago. That's $100,000 we have for property, doing things with public works, but $100,000 does not go far in an area like Fairfax. The trend since 20 plus years is there is a less than 0.5. I have 1% on there. It's actually less than 0.6 or 0.5 of our tax dollars goes back into Fairfax and public works. Our district is 100 years old and needs improvements moving into its next 100 years to keep it competitive and thriving. Fairfax continues to provide a steady amount of Wyandotte County provide a steady amount to Wyandotte County KCK and property and utility taxes. Real personal property tax and personal property tax values have essentially switched places while utility taxes are trending up. Fairfax is among the highest contributor in property taxes to the unified government. Fairfax has been one of the largest tax sources for the UG since 1951. In 2021, Fairfax contributed over $19 million in property tax and utility tax. 8.1 million of this went directly to the unified government. Fairfax generated 1.137 million in sales and use tax revenue for the city and county in 2017. Fairfax has great paying jobs with numerous openings. We all need to continue to work together to get more Wyandotte County residents employed in these open jobs. Is we would like to have our Fairfax Fire Station reopen, and that would be sooner than later. Despite strong protests by FIA and Fairfax businesses, the Fairfax Fire Station was closed in 2020 by a vote of the Unified Government Commission at the recommendation of former County Administrator and Fire Chief Callahan. This was in spite of the UG Commission voting to approve just a year or so prior the Northeast Master Plan, which included in it the Fairfax Master Plan, which specifically included always keeping the Fairfax Fire Station open. This was disappointing after so much work and money was spent on this Northeast Master Plan to have it so quickly, I guess, voted out or not kept as promised. Fairfax was promised that the NFPA guidelines of first response could be met with the Quindaro Fire Station by the former County Administrator and Fire Chief Callahan. These response times were met only once since its closure, and that was for 1 quarter when many of the largest businesses in Fairfax were closed due to COVID, thus not needing the typical calls for service. This is putting over 10,000 employees in a heavy industrial work setting and highly hazardous environment at risk, of which Fairfax more than contributes enough in taxes to pay for its own fire station. A third item of concern is we would also like to see there's a section of a southbound lane on Fairfax Traffic Way that has been closed for, I believe, over 3 years. due to a structural issue. We'd like to see it repaired and reopened. There's a picture of it. Oops, not keeping up with my slides. Fairfax Traffic Way is highly traveled. It speeds over 45 plus miles per hour, and honestly, it's much higher than that, by semis and vehicles. This causes serious traffic and safety issues as vehicles are cutting each other off to move over to the one open lane and avoid getting possibly caught by a rail crossing that's just ahead that can block the road for 10 minutes or more. We have been told this project is moving up the priority list, but FIA has been continuing to receive numerous complaints by businesses and employees. We would like to see this project get expedited on the repair list before a major accident happens. And next, I want to talk about the accomplishments that we've had just recently. Due to a TDD fund set up by the unified government during the developing stages of an area in Fairfax, FIA has been able to build its first ever monument entrance signage recognizing you are in the Fairfax district. This TDD is funded by new development in this area that requires an additional percentage in tax on top of the regular property taxes for the first 10 years. This TDD fund is for FIA to determine its use in Fairfax within certain guidelines. The B-25 Mitchell bomber plane is on top of each tower to pay homage to our B-25 World War II history. 3 of the Fairfax towers were installed last year. We are planning to have another tower installed within the next 12 months. And as you can see, there's a picture of them lit up during, or what it looks like during the day, and then we can change the colors as it lights up at night. It's got a lot of attention and people are starting to recognize they're in Fairfax district. In 2021, after several years of communication and meetings, FIA was able to get commitment from the Union Pacific Railroad to send in a tie gang to replace and repair over 32 railroad crossings in the Fairfax district. This was a several $million investment by the Union Pacific Railroad in Fairfax. The UG also invested out of its railroad crossing budget $300,000 towards this project. Oops, it didn't go. This year, we announced that the Fairfax levies will be receiving $4 million in federal tax dollars to make improvements in the Fairfax levee. The Fairfax Drainage District, also known as Steve Daly, who's back behind, you probably know him, along with Rep. Sharice Davids, they lobbied and were able to get funding needed to put manholes along the levee. These manholes are needed to monitor the Fairfax levee, ensure continued flood protection of the Fairfax district. Fairfax's future is bright. Let's work together and show we are Fairfax proud. And that's the end of my presentation. So if you have any questions, I'm here.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Melissa, for coming before us. Thank you to Fairfax and all the businesses. As it's noted, they're vital to the economic health and well-being, not only to our city, but to the county. So thank you for all that they do and for that they provide. And I hope that they call Wyandotte County and KCK home, going very, very far into the future. I agree that we need to work together and see what we can do better for FIA and for the businesses and to the improvements. But later today, budget cuts.
Right.
So we see people, we need funding, we need more, but then there's a move to cut. And recklessly cut, in my opinion. So I'm going to make a public statement to you to say I will work with the fellow commissioners that are wanting to do this, to provide more services, more resources, more funding to FIA, because it is. And I know the biggest one was the fire station. I was against it. against closing it. I voted against it. And I want to reopen it. That is something that I have repeatedly stated. And so I am willing to work with each and every one commissioner that is wanting to provide more funding, more services to FIA, because we need to keep the businesses there. We need to keep them safe. We need to keep them running. I had a chance to, it was very fun. I had a chance to tour the Kellogg's
Oh, yeah.
factory. And so that was very fun and interesting. I saw the whole process of a Cheez-It being made, and it was really cool opportunity. So that is my commitment to you, and I will maintain that commitment till I'm no longer on this commission. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate it. I appreciate budget. I have my own business. We're all business owners in Fairfax. We're very familiar with budgets, and there's never enough money that you want. But I think you also have to, make sure you're protecting your best customer. Anyone else?
Okay, thank you so much. And
All right.
just want to let you know as well, I've made it known that we do support Fairfax as well as the fire station. So hopefully we can continue having that conversation and bring something for this commission that can be favorable for all the businesses in Fairfax. But thank you for your presentation.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for your time. And we're not going anywhere. So we're here. We're always willing to talk, come up with new ideas and solutions to achieve our goals. So just be in touch.
Before you leave, we've got Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you,
Townsend.
Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Townsend, District 1. I could not let Executive Melissa leave without thanking her for the opportunity to work with her and the Fairfax Board and all of the businesses. That relationship between the unified government and Fairfax has only gotten stronger since I started with the commission in 2013 with Madam Exec's predecessor and her, and she's continued to raise the profile of Fairfax Industrial. So it's been an honor to work with them. And this was a great presentation. I think she was last here 2 or 3 years ago, but in light of the 100th anniversary, it was a great presentation and good timing. And I look forward to continue to working with Fairfax to address its needs. With the proviso, as I've always said, we have to do what is reasonable. One of the good things I like about working with Fairfax is these are business people. So they understand the challenges that each of us face. So appreciate you and appreciate Fairfax Industrial Association and all the businesses located in Fairfax. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Townsend. All right. Have a good evening.
Thank you. And we appreciate Ms. Clark for that presentation. This takes us to our second item, which is the budget workshop. I'll turn it over to our county administrator, Ms. Cheryl Harrison Lee, and she'll take it from there. Before we go, Commissioner Townsend, you still have your hand up. Did you have a question?
Yeah, a comment. I am not seeing any video. I was able to see the presentation, but there is no video currently coming through on my end other than just this fifth floor conference room statement. So I can't see any of the speakers. So just wanted to let you know that's what's going on my end.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Stites, and I also can't see either.
Thank you, Commissioner Stites. Administrator, yeah, if you could take it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Cheryl Harrison Lee, Interim County Administrator. Mayor, Commissioners, at the August 4th budget presentation, the commission requested that we look at a 5% and a 10% budget reduction across the various departments. Tonight, we have half of the departments to present. We'll hear from public safety, the constitutional officers, and administration. Before we start, I want to thank the departments for preparing this information in a very rapid timeframe to be able to get back to you tonight. The agenda for the workshop is to show the impacts of the increased valuation impacts, to look at the budget options that you requested, the 5% and 10%. In addition, with a keen understanding of what your expectations are, we have included some additional budget options for your consideration tonight as well that will be presented by the budget staff. In addition, we asked the departments to go through the budget exercise of 5% and 10%. You'll hear from the assistants regarding the impact from the departments. And we also have the department staff here so that if you have additional questions, they can answer them. And most importantly, we're interested in getting your direction and your feedback. Again, the budget process is like a three-legged stool. It is staff, it is residents, and it is you as a governing body. With that, I'll turn it over to our budget team.
All right, so I'm I thought this slide was a little later in the presentation. I'm Kathleen Von Atchen, the Chief Financial Officer. And we are presenting this slide because we wanted to provide you with an overview of how the upcoming property tax bills will look for residents. Specifically, well, residents, not as opposed to residents and businesses. We've assumed that an average resident is has a home of roughly 150,000 and a business is about 500,000. These are figures, of course, calculated strictly based on the information provided to the finance department by the appraiser and include a slight reduction due to anticipated delinquencies. So it also excludes any assessed value growth related to new improvements or new construction. So we're trying to isolate exactly, an average person's single family home, how much would it be for them? And as you can see, the 2022 tax bill is sort of a way of comparing the current with the new bill that we anticipate coming down the pipe. So if you live in Kansas City, Kansas, which would be a city and county property tax bill, you would have $1,342 per year as your property tax bill. And if you were a commercial entity with a value of about $500,000, your annual property tax bill would be $9,728. And so then going over to the 2023 tax bill, given the increase in market value of the homes and adjusting for the half mil county reduction, that is included in the county administrator's recommended proposed budget, the tax bill would increase to $1,578 per year, or $236, and the commercial would increase to $10,032, or an increase of $594,000. Down below are the same calculations, except only if you live in the county. And so in the county or non-Kansas City, Kansas areas, such as if you live in Bonner Springs or Edwardsville or parts of Lake Quivira. So those are the property tax bills with respect to the unified government that would be included. So.
Current slide is hi, I'm Reginald Lindsay, Unified Government Budget Director. And the current slide what you have here is the total mills for the unified government. So basically what we have is on the county and the city side, we have 38 mills on the city side and 38 mills on the county side. So it gives you a total of 77.82. The general funds make up 70% of this budget almost. So we can see up in the corner here, the pie chart just shows that 68% of the funds are made up by the general funds. And then the others are made up by the bond and interest fund, which makes up about a quarter of the pie chart. And then 32% is made up by other funds. And those include the election fund, also the aging fund, and also mental health, development disabilities, and the county health fund. This current slide is a view of the increased property valuations across the county, across our different tax levy funds. So you can see it's a total of $15 million. We can see that the property taxes levied in 2022 are $110 million. And you can see the mill rates for all the tax levies across the county right here. Then the property taxes levied in 2023, what they would be. And so that difference between the $110 million and $125 million is a $15 million increase for 2023. So the largest one was in the county general fund. And then the next largest one would have been in the city general fund. And then you have the city bond and interest that came in at $3.1 million. So this chart here, this is a view of the city general fund on the expense side. And over in the city general fund, in 2022, we had a $172 million budget. In 2023, we have a $169 million budget. Some of the increases, looking at it like line to line, there's we have a $123 million budget for personnel in 2023 compared to $119 million in 2022. That's about a $3.7 million difference. Some of the increases there includes a COLA increase, different contractual agreements across the unified governments. And then we also moved an additional 16 EMS personnel to this fund. And also one of the other big jumps is in our capital projects. So here we had some projects going on. We have a fleet center is going to get resurfaced. And then also we're doing a disparity study in 2023. And then also we're having a fuel infrastructure project at the fleet center. And then we have increased costs for a transit route, new transit route that we're having, but that also had an offset for revenue also. So those are some of the new capital projects that were included. So here in the county general fund, we have a $77 million expense budget in for 2022, and the 2023 proposed budget is an $80 million budget. And we can see personnel is only up by a fraction, not up much, only about $1.7 million. And then you go down into the capital, that's an increase there of about $300,000. One of the biggest increases there is we're doing street preservation for a contract that we have out in Loring, which is a county function.
So there was a question raised. There was a question raised by some of the commissioners this past week concerning the bonded interest funds. There are two of them. It's the city bonded interest fund and the county bonded interest fund. And these are, well, the balances total, I think you can find that information on the financial status of the bonded interest funds here in the budget book. And they're on, I can tell you, the first one, the city one, is on page, it's on page 53. And you can see that in the proposed budget, there is a total of roughly $9 million or so. That's available or planned to be available at the end of 23. And we wanted to provide you with some information or explanation of how those funds are restricted. So all the funds, by the way, in the city, county, and the TIF debt service funds are in fact statutorily reserved. And so you can only spend the money on debt service payments. So there is that. In the city bond and interest fund, and of course, I've done some rounding here, but roughly $6 million of the outstanding balance that you see on page 53 is the outstanding balance related to our special obligation tax increment financing districts. So there's roughly about 22 TIF districts that were formed over the past 20 years that we administer. And those are all reflected in this fund here that you're seeing. They've been combined all together here. And about 5 million of the balances are reserved to pay for future debt service payments on the TIF districts. So I've done a forecast of the TIF districts, and there's some really good news there. Many of the TIF districts can be paid off in the coming year and also in the subsequent few years. There are some districts that are underwater and will require support from the main city bond and interest fund. But overall, the estimate is that by 2025, the fund balance, if we issued no more TIF districts, the fund balance for all of those TIFs would be running around $500,000. So really, we're paying off those TIF districts and paying off that debt early. So anyway, I can be happy to provide more information at another time. The other 4 million is in the city bond and interest is reserves for to make sure that we make the debt service payments into the future. And it assumes that we're having maybe an assessed value increase of only 6% in the future years, beginning in 2024. So that's all. It's just reserves in case assessed value doesn't come in at that 6% level. So now I did want to tell you that if governmental GO debt is limited to an average of say $18 million per year, which is about 5 or 6 years ago, administratively, it was determined that we should keep our GO governmental debt at $15 million. If you were to inflate that with inflation, it now equates to roughly $18 million. So that's where I got that. Let's just assume if we were on average to issue only 18 million debt in the next 4 or 5 years, then we could begin to reduce that 17 mils that's currently dedicated for city bond and interest on an annual basis beginning in 2024. And of course, that just assumes that assessed value increases by 6%. So that is good news for taxpayers. There is an opportunity there. Of course, we want to keep our debt down, but because that's our policy. But we also want to start investing more in cash funded street preservation. So that's over in the general fund and other areas of the budget than here. So on the county bond and interest side, much smaller fund. They only have a mill of roughly 2 mills. And right now there's a reserve in there for about roughly 2 million of the reserve is a result of prior transfers from the county general fund to this fund in order to make sure there was enough money in place to make the annual debt service payment of 1.8 million for the juvenile detention center annual debt service bond. So that's what that money's there, just to make sure there's enough to cover those bond payments. So, go ahead.
Reginald Lindsay, Unified Government Budget Director. Current slide is a view of our 32 different funds and our $432 million budget. So we can see we have in 2023 our proposed budget, which is a $432 million budget. And what we are doing now is showing if we had a 5% reduction in each fund and also a 10% reduction in each fund, what that would look like and how much would have to be cut from each fund and what the budget amount would be after that. And then also like our total budget, what that would be if we were to cut 5% or 10%. So we could see if we were to cut 5% from our $432 million budget, it'd be $410 million. And if we were to cut 10%, it'd be $380 million. So one of the things that we have within these 32 different funds, some of them are tax levy funds, but a majority of them are special revenue funds or enterprise funds, and they have special functions that they provide. So next slide
Commissioner-
is the city general fund.
Reggie, excuse me just a second. Commissioner Stites has his hand up.
Go ahead, Commissioner Stites.
Commissioner Stites, District 7, and I was trying to be recognized there prior to moving on to this slide. If we could go back one slide, if it's okay, Mayor. One of the things that I find confusing is last Thursday, we were given the presentation that showed that if we had a assessed value growth at 5%, and now this presentation, we're showing an assessed value growth at 6%. I think that some of the things that gets a little confusing for myself is that the numbers are never appear to be the same. That we were talking about $150,000 house, and then now our $200,000 house last year, and now it's $150,000. And that's what gets a little bit confusing to me, is that the numbers, yeah, right there, that 150, and last Thursday we were talking about 200,000, and then the presentation, like I said last week, was based on a 5% assessed value growth, and now this time it's a 6%. So that's just some of my frustration, is that I just don't track the numbers are the same all the time. Thank you.
Ms. Von Adrian, do you have a response for the commissioner in that regard, please?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I think it was rounding our discussion of the projected assessed value for beginning in 24 through 20 and beyond. Because honestly, I can't remember exactly how much it is, but it's somewhere between, it's somewhere between 5 and 6%. And so it's just a question of the presentation we rounded up or down. So it's the same number. I just don't remember offhand if it's 5.6 or 5.5 or what have you.
Thank you. Commissioner Burrows has a question.
Thank you. If I remember from the discussion the other day, the initial value that was shared with us was 125,000. And I commented on that, and I believe staff came back and said it was around 165, and today we see 150. But when we're comparing 150 and seeing a 235 increase, those that have a larger home, the 300,000, the 450, when you start getting up to those ranges, that increase becomes quite monumental. And I'm not saying it's any different than those that are with a home that's not valued even at 150, but it does come into the fact that the property tax levies are awful high in this community. And I am with the commissioner that just spoke when he made comment about the numbers continue to change. And I'm not trying to be argumentative or confrontational. I think the commission is really trying to work through this budget, and it seems like we're not getting exact data continuously so that we can move forward collectively with the same understanding. That's all I have at this time, Mayor. Thank you. I do have a few more questions as we move along, but I'll wait.
So the projected increase in assessed value in the future for 24 and beyond, that's at 5 or 6%. But this 2023 is based on what the assessed value was given to us by the appraiser. And this isolates, just isolates Kansas City, Kansas, those folks that live in Kansas City, Kansas. And yeah, it has grown. The market value of homes for single family residences have grown significantly, far more than the commercial property for this upcoming year. Absolutely, it has.
And if I may, I would say, I won't argue that Commissioner Burrows at large district too. I won't argue that point that property values have increased tremendously in Wyandotte County. And it's something that we haven't had the privilege of seeing for a couple of decades. Now we're starting to see that increase, and we're not the only community experiencing that increase across the state. However, that the increase in valuation also brings with it an increase in taxation. And that's where the mill rate comes into play. And as we work through the budget, our reduction in expenses and or service cuts or whatever it may be, the direction the commission chooses to go is a challenge we have before us tonight. And I think the concerns about the numbers changing with the valuations and stuff like that, it can make it a little, at the very least, suspect, but at the same time, more confusing than anything. And so I would hope that as we move forward, that we do understand that no matter what number you present, it's going to be reflective throughout the entire budget. We're going to have to work with those numbers. But when we're talking about $100,000 ask here with that we just had a presentation for, we could make that up with some of the percentages that are being provided. Some of us believe that that's possible. But thank you, Mayor, and for the body for allowing me the time to take another bite at the apple.
You can continue, Ms. Foundation.
So where we left off, we were looking at different options as far as in our different funds. And again, this is Reginald Lindsay, Unified Government Budget Director. So current funding we're looking at is the City General Fund. And what we have here displayed on the screen are 3 different options for the City General Fund. And then we have what we're proposing for the 2023 budget. So within the City General Fund, we have a $169 million proposed budget. And when we first started off with this proposed budget, we were $4.2 million more expenses going out than revenue coming in. And so one of the things that we have is an option A at 2.5% reduction for the City General Fund. And if we were to cut 2.5% from the budget, we would almost eliminate the $4.2 million deficit that we have, or expenditures being more than revenue. And then we have an option B, which is a 5% reduction. And that would be a $160 million budget as opposed to a $169 million budget. And that would put $4.2 million into our fund balance and increase it to $8.4 million. And then we have an option C, and this is if we were to cut 10% of the budget. And that amount, if we were to cut 10% of the budget, would be $16 million. So total expenses would be $152 million as opposed to what we have proposed now of $169 million. And we can see our fund balance would go up to $49 million, and we'd be at a 32% fund balance. So we can kind of see with option A, just to kind of recap, if we were to cut 2.5% from our budget, we'd have a 22% fund balance, as opposed to what we're proposing at a 19% fund balance. And then with option B, we'd have a 25% fund balance, and then option C, a 32% fund balance.
I have a question for you. The one thing that I'm not clear on, and I apologize if it's there and if I've missed it, but I'd just like a little clarity on the revenues appear to be clear, and I know some of those are estimates, guesstimates, from what I've heard, which is fine. But the expenses, we're projecting expenses going into 2023. I haven't seen a slide yet, and I apologize if I missed it. How are we calculating expenses outside of paying benefits that really go into that number, and how's that broken down? It just, every year, it seems like, what I hear from staff is that expenses go up, our budget keeps going up, and we keep allowing tax increases to compensate for that, without streamlining or really looking at how, where these expenses are coming from. And so is there anything that can better allow this commission, to at least see, where these expense increases are coming from, department by department, and how are we projecting that out for 2023? Is that just a good estimate, outside of just what we know? And I believe we have a good handle on what we know is personnel costs. But outside of that, how does that play into the overall total expenses? And what's that percentage outside of the personnel costs that plays into that? And then what are we doing to cut those expenses, as far as if they're contractual, things of that nature? I just want to know, is there anything that you all can show to give us a better determination on what our true expenses projections look like, moving into 2023?
So we did have one slide that went through earlier, which is the city general fund, and we're breaking it down by category. So what we have here is the 2023 city general budget. So we have with personnel, which you just discussed, Mayor, we're coming in at $123 million. It is up $3.7 million from the prior year. And the increases include contractual agreements that we have, and then also COLA increases that we have built into the budget, and then cost increases for health benefit adjustments. And then also we added additional 16 EMS within this fund. And then we do have contractual services so this fund did have a contractual service come out in the amount of about $8.5 million, which was our solid waste trash contract. We moved it to the enterprise fund. So we can see that contractual services do go from $27 million down to $19 million on the expense side, but it also goes down on the revenue side also. So they cancel each other out. But some of the cost increases are just service agreements or have been going up. And then also just contracted increases on just UG systems across the board. And then commodity wise, expenses are up just due to cost of natural gas and gasoline have gone up, and then projected costs. And then also we have like capital projects where we have had cost increase. So for instance, like our Turner Fire Station, who had a cost increase, that was an additional $600,000. And then just to keep up our infrastructure, just as far as for our buildings and parking lots, we've had some increased costs for that. And then one of the costs that is not in here is we need $26 million to keep up with our pavement preservation across the city. So this kind of offers a view of what that would look like. We'd have a total of $28 million budget, but we only have like the $6.3 million here.
So I guess it looks like 53.8% for CMIP projects and equipment, correct? That's the increase I'm saying as far as cost projections.
Yes.
How do we arrive at that? And I think I've asked before, what CMIP projects are still there that haven't been completed? And what funds are there? And those are approved CMIP projects. And then how do we specifically get to these estimates, and what does that breakdown look like? I think that would give us a better idea, or at least as commission, because that's a huge projection. And I just want to know what these projections are predicated on. Were they guesstimates? And then if you're telling me that some of these projections are based off conversations you were having with vendors or whatever increased costs may be out there, how do we arrive at that? And are we working with some of these contractors to hold the line on these costs. It just seems like they go up every year, they keep going up. And I'm just trying to really get a handle on why our costs keep going up. And I just haven't seen a breakdown that really breaks that down definitive. And if I missed it, I apologize, but I'd like to see how are we arriving specifically these cost these cost projections. I mean, where are we getting these from?
So with our capital projects and capital equipment purchases, we do have a capital process that we start in January. That's about a 2.5 month process where we have different core groups within the organization that we work through and the departments that go out and make their requests, but then they also work with specialists within the organization to help them go out and get the bids for their projects. But one of the things that we are experiencing this year that is very different from any other year is just this is a supply chain demand has really increased the cost of some of our projects and equipment that we are trying to procure this year. So that is a lot of our increase, but we also are not spending enough to keep up with our maintenance and of our infrastructure, and then also just with vehicles also. So
I hear you say that, and I don't doubt what you're saying. I believe this question probably isn't directly for you, but it's for these individual department heads that presented you these cost projections. I'd like to know, and I'd like for this commission to have a breakdown. I like to trust but verify that these projections are completely accurate. I want this commission to know, especially when they're having to make these hard decisions with where we're at with our budget, line by line, where are these cost projection increases coming from, and specifically, what do they look like? So we can know, and because we're talking about projections going out into next year, I'm having a hard time grasping how are we getting these cost projections this year going into next year, and why isn't that information being provided if we already know what those projections are?
and also one thing I'll share with you. So like what we spent in 2022, or where we're planning on spending $3.4 million in 2022, and then we're jumping up to $5.3 million. This amount is, like to keep up with our maintenance and just maintenance of vehicles, maintenance of our buildings, and maintenance of our road. That was a low amount and wasn't allowing us to meet certain things, just as far as just projects and equipment across the county. And then this amount where we jump up here is mostly has to do with just trying to catch up, and then also projects that we have that have had cost increase. But there may be a way where we can drill down further into costs with departments, but for now, I know departments are really struggling on trying to keep up with maintenance of buildings and infrastructure.
I get that, but it goes in line with what Commissioner Burrows mentioned. It's just, since I've been here as mayor, I've watched the numbers change, different slides change, and it is confusing when there's no consistency. And so that makes me want to ask even more questions as to the validity of what's being presented, so I can verify that. And so I really would like at some point, if these are the increases we're talking about, so the commission can make an informed decision, I'd like for me and them to be able to have all the detailed information. I believe Commissioner Davis mentioned this last time as well, or Commissioner Ramirez. As much detailed information as we can so they can make an informed decision on this budget process. So that's just an ask, but thank you. Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Commissioner Burrows, at-large District 2. I want to cut to the chase here. I see the 2.5%, the 5%, and the 10% cuts into next year's budget.
Mhm.
That's on top of us not taking the revenue neutral rate and working it. So we're looking at no mill reductions except for maybe the half mill or the quarter mill that we talked about. So we're taking an additional $15 million into next year, and we're only going to cut 2.5% in the budget. Have we looked at doing a 2% budget cut by the end of this year through the departments to reduce our expenditures so we don't have to get into our reserves and come up even with our revenue stream so that we're not having to go in and tap our revenue. I mean, it's nice to see we've got a $15 million increase next year, but then we're going to come in and do a 2.5% cut or a 5% cut in addition to the mill and or quite possibly the pilot. We don't know yet, but there's no way to reduce the expenses for 2022 right now to keep us neutral by the end of the year. Because I think while I've been here, most of the time I don't see the expenses. I see the budget coming in exceeding the projections, and I see expenses come down a little. And we can do carryover into next year when we have more money because we're going to have 15 million more. There's ways to do this, but to dip into our funds this year and then ask for a 2.5% cut for next year when we already get 15 million more from the taxpayers, it's a little daunting to think that we can't do something today to all of a sudden correct the ship, grab the wheel and turn it hard one way or another to start that reduction now. What we're doing is we're delaying going back and cutting into the budgets by 5 or 6 more months. Time for more money to be spent without oversight to the extent that commissioners have concerns. I'm not about bankrupting the community. We have to avoid this. What I am talking about is getting our ship righted, and we need to start today. And that's kind of where my mindset is, but those are my concerns. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnson.
So to that question, if we want to make that decision today, the question that we have to ask ourselves is how many persons are we willing to lay off right now? Well, I mean, if you have other thoughts, but to me, everything is going, the cost of goods sold is going up. You can look at any publication across the nation, they'll tell you this, across the nation, the cost of goods sold is going up. The place that if you want to make automatic right now decisions, you're going to have to be willing to lay some people off. Now, we may just disagree on that, but I think that's about where we are.
Commissioner Kearney.
Thank you. I do find it somewhat surprising that we're sitting here asking where'd all this increase come from when we as a governing body voted on a percentage increase in cost of living adjustment as a part of a contract. That I don't know. I think we know where some of it came from because we voted on it. We voted affirmatively for it.
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you. I'm just trying to find words here. I'm not in favor of these cuts. They're rather arbitrary and against my academic training, which is something that I ran on and something that I promised my constituents that I would use in the event that they elected me. And so that's one thing. The cost of everything is going up. I don't think we have to necessarily answer more questions. Reggie, you are beautifully navigating answering those questions, but just go to the gas station, go to the pump and see what the price is, go to the grocery store, see what the prices are. Inflation is real. And so these are just projections. But the other part that we're missing here is we want to keep talent and attract new talent. We're trying to attract a new high quality county administrator. We can't keep doing this. I want to be able to tell folks and be able to attract talent and say, we're going to believe that the investment that we make in our people and in our infrastructure is going to improve the quality of life. That's what I hear. I understand the desire for tax cuts, but as I said before, and I'll say it again, we have not made every effort to have a special session with the other governing bodies that contribute. Can we go back to that slide? Because it was pointed out there, what the house is in commercial and residential, right? So what's missing here? School districts. What's missing here? The library. What's missing here? The state of Kansas. I mean, it's for us to just focus on what we're doing and then somehow, some way expect that magically that's going to balance out with the other governing jurisdictions. It's just not right. There is a possibility that we can cut 2 mills. We can go revenue neutral. And if all the other taxing jurisdictions either remain where they're at, meaning they're not going to be revenue neutral, or they increase, to which I have heard some are about to do that, they can cut any sort of progress and tax relief that we put forth as a unified government. We have to be mindful of that. We have to think about what works best for us. We also have to think about the waters that we swim in, the economy that we are in, and the fact that we need people. And if I'm looking for a job and they're saying they're about to just cut, I've had folks reach out to me saying, Commissioner Davis, I don't think I'm going to apply. We can't improve our streets. We can't improve our parks. We cannot improve the quality of services if we do not have people. And I would not be very confident if my future employer is looking at budget cuts arbitrarily. Thank you.
Burrows?
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't want to belabor the costs, but my colleagues, we all, as I've stated all along, we have some tough choices to make here. And the first thing that happens when a budget cuts is it's usually presented personnel is going to be eliminated. That's kind of like the fearful on the national level. The first thing the government's going to cut is Social Security. And what do? They ramp up the senior population and put the fear factor out there. There are things that we can cut without, we can slow down on purchases. We can slow down on CMIP for 3 or 4 months and get this budget balanced before we go into next year with an additional $15 million. And then with the percentage cuts, there's ways to do this. We haven't collectively sat down and looked by department as to what they can cut. Now, we're going to get a presentation earlier, and I went through some of them, and some of them are pretty decent recommendations. But if we don't continue to look at how we can cut some of this stuff, we're going to be facing the same issue next year, the following year, and the following year. It has to start sometime, someplace. And I believe we still have the vacant positions that we haven't filled in 2 or 3 years still within this budget. And so we haven't even really had that discussion. And we have essential personnel that shouldn't even be touched. We value our personnel. It was a unanimous decision by the commission to ensure that we retain those quality individuals. But is that going to keep us from going out and hiring if we can't afford to meet our expenses now? What are we forecasting when we bring employees in that we're not going to be able to hire you? We're not going to be able to keep you because our budget's not balancing. But you've been kind enough to listen, and I see Commissioner Ramirez is about to break his arm, so we better call on Commissioner Ramirez.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Shouldn't have to give the disclosure every time, and I think this may be the last time. I'm going to be speaking very openly and very frank. Yeah, we make tough decisions on this commission, but these cuts would cripple our government's ability to do its job. Possibly closing fire stations, reducing community policing. That's what's in here. That's what we're going to see tonight. Let me finish. I agree that we can slim down departments. We can slim down expenses. But to do 5%, 10%, even 2.5% across the board? No, absolutely not. It is not, this isn't good governance. This is not prudent, being prudent with taxpayer money. This is just for political points.
Commissioner Markley?
Thanks, Mayor. you know, I think across the board cuts are a lazy way to do a budget. And I think we know already in this budget, we've discussed that we have departments that need more support and more personnel. We've talked specifically about parks and about public works, and we've talked about the codes department. We've talked about the sheriff's department. Are we going to go to the same departments that we just all discussed need additional support and tell them they have to cut their budget? That seems to be counterproductive. We should have been having this conversation if we wanted to have it back in March, so that we had plenty of time to look at our departments individually and make decisions based on the individual needs. But I'm not in favor of across the board cuts because it's lazy and it doesn't support our goals or the goals of our community as stated in the community survey.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonham.
Kathleen, in this document, is that this document? Okay, slide 13, if it is. That one. So Reggie or Kathleen, this slide, is it giving me scenarios of a potential 2 mil reduction on the county mill levy with a remaining fund balance of 15 million and a 20% reserve? That this is a real scenario. I want to make sure what I'm looking at in your presentation, because this looks to me like you're offering us an option D of a 2 mil reduction on the county side. And what in here are the assumptions that have been made as it relates to all of the exercises we made our departments go through with their 5 and 10% scenarios?
So we have not included any of the departments, the exercise they went through yet. We want you all to hear what they have to present. But the dollar amount that we would be setting our expense budget at would be $77 million as opposed to the $80 million budget. And we'd be cutting $3.1 million from our budget.
From the county
Yeah,
side
to be able
of
to
the
cut 2
budget,
mills and then have a 20% fund
we'd
balance.
still have a 20% fund balance with 15 million in reserves. We would experience a $3.1 million reduction of our county side budget. And we would have to determine, I'm guessing collectively, where we would eliminate the 3.1 million. Am I right?
That is correct. There would have to be some decisions made on where we would be cutting this $3.1 million.
So, and I'm not holding anyone harmless, and I'm not saying, well, I prefer to cut county services over city services. And I know that we asked all these departments to walk us through these scenarios of what the reality in their departments would be at these 5 and 10% cuts. But this is where I'm landing, period. 2 mills, county side reduction. I will gladly help look for the 3.1 million, whatever the reduction is, wherever it can, if it's a $3.1 million reduction, those places where we might not do something this year that we had hoped to do in order to provide this scenario. And the reason I say that is because we know that in the years prior, when we've been able to provide mill levy reduction, we've done it on the city side, and we explained that. Kathleen explained that to us a week or so ago about how and why we made those choices. And we have taxpayers in Bonner and Edwardsville asking for some parity. That if we're going to consider mill levy reductions, that we consider mill levy reductions that would potentially benefit every taxpayer in Wyandotte County and not just those who live in KCK, but
Commissioner Davis?
I wasn't done. I was just waiting
I'm sorry.
because the reason I asked us to move to this room was so that we could have a conversation together and talk to one another. And so I'm putting forward for us.
At least see what the department's looking. Okay.
I'm putting forward for us to discuss 2 Mills County, get a little bit of tax relief. I'm not saying we have to be done. I'm just asking for the conversation.
That's an open conversation. If the commission wants to have it before we move on to Commissioner Davis and Ramirez. Anybody wants to respond to Commissioner Bynum's question?
As I said before, I'm for incremental tax relief. It has to be done methodically and responsibly. And so I will definitely entertain if we can increase, right, that mill reduction. But again, it needs to be done methodically and responsibly. I am for us looking at and trimming, but as I said before, and I just want to be clear, because I do agree, vacant positions and other expenditures we can look at. But what we have right now and the amount of time that we are putting into something that if put on the agenda would not pass. I'd bet my life savings on it. It just would not pass. We spend a lot of time on things that will not pass. And I would hope, Ms. Harrison, that we would focus on the actual budget and answering questions about what was given to us a week ago, as opposed to spending a lot of time on these cuts. And understand that for the 25th, you all are asking for an additional hour of our time to start at 3:00. Just for the public, we usually start at 5, so that we can talk about the other half of cuts that do not have political will. And so this feels like the sales tax that went nowhere. It feels like the revenue neutral that did not have the votes. And it's just a lot of time. I heard back from a lot of departments that it's anxiety inducing, right? To think about, well, this is where the commission is going, where it's not where we're going. And what I would recommend for you, Ms. Harrison, is to get some sort of straw poll before we go through and order staff to do stuff that will not pass on the agenda. Whether that is just getting a sense of where we're at and what we want to do, but I don't necessarily think that this is where the majority of us are. Thank you.
Commissioner Ramirez?
That would help us today.
I
Want to look at. That would help us.
go back. I agree, everything Commissioner Davis said. To Commissioner Bynum's point in open discussion, if it's sustainable, if we can do it without, 1, affecting our fund balance, and 2, not severely affecting county services and the services we provide, not just to KCK, but to the cities of Edwardsville and Bonner, I would entertain us continuing to have the conversation and looking at it, only if it is sustainable. And as what I can see from here, 2 mil is sustainable, but I would like Kathleen, you to talk more about it, that sustainability and that ability to maintain those services without severely disrupting them.
We could do 2.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So this is Kathleen Von Atchen. And I would like to point out that last year, so the forecast towards the end of the budget season did demonstrate that there is an opportunity for reducing the county mill up to 2% or 2 mills even. And so And that in the out years, it is sustainable, even with conservative estimates of 5 to 6% in growth in assessed value. Those are very conservative. So I think it is sustainable, absolutely. And I have presented information in prior workshops with the fund balance estimates showing the county general fund and how, if you reduce the mill, how it looks. So I'd be happy to provide those at the next workshop we have so that you're convinced.
And yes, Commissioner Bynum, I would
And
be open.
I do want to point out that if you make that $3 million cut, it should be to operations, not capital, because capital is just a one-time thing.
Right, I would agree.
Thank you.
Commissioner McCarron.
Thank you. In terms of open positions, if they've been open for a long time and we don't need them, sure, get rid of them. But I've said this before, sometimes when you have open positions and you can't fill them, you have to ask why. And sometimes the reason you can't fill them is that the benefits package and the salary that you are offering is not competitive with the rest of the market. And therefore, people who have competitive market skills don't need to come here. So I'll just throw that out there again for us to just keep in the back of our minds as we talk about open positions.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to go on record tonight as saying that I am not in favor of a meal reduction anywhere. There are too many unknowns in our economy right now. We've already talked about cost of goods sold. It's sitting us right in the face. And I don't think that is prudent governance to lower a meal or a half a meal we're not even technically out of pandemic. We still don't know what may come around the corner. And when there are, in my own pocketbook, and hey, everybody does what they do. When I sense uncertainty and not knowing how much things are going to cost, I say hold the line until I can sense that things have leveled out. And right now, I don't sense that. I don't think it's prudent governance for us to lower the mill levy right now because we don't know there are too many unknowns in the future that can make a big impact on that. And then all of us as citizens of Wyandotte County will suffer. And so we're already at the bone. I don't want to get any more closer to it. I'm not willing to, and I'll go on record as saying, for right now, I'm not willing to endorse any lowering of the mill levy at this time. I'll probably get outvoted, but I want to be the one. I will say and stand on my record. Thank you.
Okay. I got a quick question that goes in line. I believe that Commissioner McCarron mentioned it. How many vacant positions do we have in the unified government?
So I could talk particular to the county general fund. We do have 124 vacant positions in the county general fund right now. And like 70 of those are like within the sheriff's department.
Okay. And are they funded? Were they funded last year?
So
Currently funded?
So
positions?
out of those 124 positions, I would say 37 of them are funded. Then we also we have where overtime, if we were to hire for those sheriff's positions, overtime would go towards those positions. So 37 of them are sitting funded, and then as we add more sheriff's deputies, overtime would go down to allow us to hire more.
How many exist on the KCK side?
It's 124 also on the KCK side, and about 69 of those are police department, and about 37 or I think like fire department. Okay. Yes, I can.
We can't hear whoever doesn't have the speaker mic on.
He just wants you to repeat that, Reggie, if you would, about the numbers of funded positions that are vacant in both the Wyandotte County side and the KCK side.
So in Wyandotte County, on the county side, we got 124 vacants. And then on the city side, in the city general fund, we have 124 vacants also. And so within the county, the sheriff's department has 70 vacants. And then city general fund, police department has 42 vacants and fire department has 25 vacants for a total of 67 vacants.
In total, how many of those are funded? Are they all funded? Were they funded or just a portion of them?
So on the city side, we got 56 of the vacants funded. And then on the county side, 37 of the positions funded.
Thank you. You can continue. Do you have another question?
Commissioner Stites has his hand up.
Commissioner Stites?
Commissioner Stites, District 7. So if I'm doing my math right, that's 93 funded positions that are on the books. And what is that? What is that amount that we're carrying and not having those positions filled?
So in the city general fund, it's $6.6 million that will fully fund us that we are not including in the budget. Then on the
6 million on the city side.
Yes.
Okay.
And then $8.2 million if we were to fully fund the positions in the county side.
That's a lot of money. I mean, that we are carrying on the books.
So no, we're not carrying those on the book. So it's
They're funded.
$8.2 million that the positions that we are not carrying.
Okay, here, I'll rephrase my question. We have 93 funded positions. What's that total amount?
So I look at them by city and county. So I think you're talking about we have 93 across the city and the county. So in the city general fund, we have 124 vacants. And that's like 12% of the fund vacant rate. There's a 1,073 people getting paid out of that fund.
Okay, I guess I'm not saying it right here. You said on the city side, there was 56, is that correct, of funded positions? There's 124 vacancies, but we have 56 that are on the books that we are funding.
Yes.
Correct. What is that amount?
$5 million.
Okay, that's 5 million on the city side. Thank you. Now, on the county side, we've got 37 that are, if I'm not mistaken, 124 that are vacant, but 37 that are currently being carried and funded. What is that amount, please?
$2.6 million.
2.6. So just rough math. I mean, if we were to just take those two line items right there, we've got a full mill plus on the county side and 2 mills on the city side. We can fund these as they come as they're hired. Am I correct in saying that? We don't have to continue to carry this money where we can give tax relief now. And as as departments hire, the police department or the fire department, the county side, we fund them. But there's no reason for us to continue to just hold this money in our pocketbook, waiting to hire people when we're looking at trying to figure out how we balance a budget and give tax relief. That's all I have to say for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner.
Also, just real quick, I would add that would be like in those positions are police, fire, and sheriff, just FYI.
Yeah, I'm not saying no problem. I'm not saying I don't want to hire police, fire, and sheriff. I'm not saying that. But when they get hired, we pay them. We don't need to continue to hold the money in our pocketbook while we're trying to balance a budget. When the police department hires another 20, we fund 20 more. When the sheriff's department hires however many, when the fire department hires how many they need, then we fund them. But we don't need to continue to just have this exorbitant amount of money sitting in our pocketbook waiting on these departments to hire. Thank you.
Commissioner Bonner.
I appreciate Commissioner Steitz's questions and suggestions, and with apologies to my colleagues, I'm gonna ask you, Reggie. I heard you say 42 police and 35 fire.
It's 25 fire.
Oh, I'm sorry, 25 fire. And what was the police?
It was 42. You were correct.
42. So that's 67. And are those in reference to the 56 funded that you referenced that equals $5 million?
Yes.
Is it 67 or 56?
So we have 56 positions that are funded.
Funded.
Yes, that are vacant.
But what we need right now in police and fire is 67.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So it's my understanding that when we're building our budget, if we're trying to fill our vacancies with these needed public safety personnel, we've got a budget for it. And that's why, for example, we have the 56 funded positions on the city side that are primarily police and fire. And then on the county side, I'm going to guess that the 37 funded positions are probably in the sheriff's department because we know they need their people. I mean, am I tracking correctly?
Yeah. So we don't identify it as, we identify as a number of positions, and we were looking at like a average salary.
Gotcha. So you're running it as an
We're tracking
average.
like how many people we're bringing.
But I
in,
guess
how many
my
people are
point
going out.
is, I'm sorry. My point is, I don't think you can unbudget for those. You need to budget for those. I appreciate what Commissioner Stites is saying, like if 37 funded positions on the county side is 2.6 million, yeah, there's my 2 mills that I want. I get that, but I'm just not sure that through the personnel line item is the way to achieve the $3 million we want to find on the county side of the budget, because if we're hoping to fill those positions, we have to fund them within the budget document. Am I wrong or am I correct? Okay, so we can't unfund these positions and balance our budget that way. We've already unfunded these other openings. You know, if there's 124 vacant, some of those are already unfunded. I'm looking for some.
Yeah,
support.
they are already unfunded, but one thing
Yeah.
is we will never like reach full employment within
Thank you.
the city general fund.
And I see Alan Howe's desperately trying to help me. So would you chime in?
I don't, excuse me, introduce more confusion. Alan Howe, System Administrator. You look at page 7 on the slide document here. So let him get there. And it's a little hard maybe to see, but that first gray line in the box, it says fully funded personnel, 130 million. So if every position in the UG was funded for the entire year, 12 months, 365 days, that would be your personnel cost. But we know that there's a trend line of vacancies because there's always people coming and going, coming and going. And budget, when they build a budget, they look at the historical trend line of those vacancies and then they back that out in order to come up with the top line number of personnel costs, in this case, 123 million. And part of the reason for that is so that you don't perennially end up with a large personnel surplus at the end that because you know you're never going to hit 100% vacancy. So I don't know if that helps clarify a little bit. The vacancy rate's kind of, it's a little confusing.
It's also just important for us to have the most basic general understanding of how hiring works within our institution. You know, you can't just write a check because you hired somebody. It doesn't work that way. You have to have an open position and everybody in that supply chain of getting that person onboarded has to know and be aware, including the payroll division. So anyway, I like the enthusiasm around it, but I'm not sure that's where we find our 3 million for a 2 mil county cut.
Thank you, Commissioner McCarron.
Thank you. So talking about these open positions, assuming that they are needed, assuming that the functions provided by the people who fill those positions are necessary for the delivery, and I'm looking at our police officers directly ahead of me here. So assuming that those services are necessary for public safety, then right now, aren't we covering for those open positions by, for example, paying overtime to the people who are working? And isn't that a more expensive solution than just filling the positions? Even if we bump up our compensation to fill the positions, are we going to save? I used to think I was a fairly smart man. I now know that I don't know anything, but it would seem to me that we could actually save a little bit of money by filling the open positions and not paying overtime. Am I way off base?
So Commissioner, it's kind of a fine line because one thing, you do have the overtime rate, but when you hire people, you do have like the benefits that you pay. So it's a fine line there. Like on which one costs more.
Commissioner McCarron, I'm sorry, Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you. Well, colleagues, I really enjoyed that discussion because I think it was somewhat educational for some of us to understand how this works. And I appreciate the offering the mill up out of one thing. It shows that we're at least looking at what our tough decisions may very well entail. But, and you gave a lot of numbers in reference to, and I don't disagree with Commissioner McKiernan's comments. Wouldn't it be cheaper if we had a full-time employee versus paying multiple overtime? And I understand that, but we need to talk attrition. These numbers that was asked by Commissioner Stites, and Reggie, you presented them, and these 56 vacant and this 37 that are funded on each side. Some of them could be police, some of them could be fire, but they're not all in police and fire. I would assume that some of them are in like codes, animal control, and throughout the entire budget process. But there has to be some positions that have been funded for well over 3 years that haven't been filled. And if they haven't been filled, then as Commissioner McKiernan stated, What's our problem? If it's the pay, then we need to go back and look at that particular position and see how we're going to do it. But just to carry these vacant positions of non-essential personnel, even if it's only out of the 93, even if it's only 40, that's still a significant savings that we can pull back for a temporary time frame and look at overall what our hiring practices and needs are within the departments. It's called shrinkage. That's what we do on the state side. You know, I don't need political points. I've been reelected a number of times in this county, and I won't apologize for being a fiscal conservative. This isn't my money that I'm talking about. It's the people's money. And I want to be a good steward, and I'm sure everybody else in here wants to be a good steward. We're going to have our differences, but we have a job to do, and we're all going to go about doing our job the best we have the ability to do. And I'm experienced in doing this on both state level and local level. And I'm just trying to provide guidance, and this was a tremendous education opportunity at learning about vacant positions, how they're funded, if they're not funded, exempt positions. So I do appreciate the questions that come forward and the opportunity for staff to explain them. But I still believe that there's room that we can work with, even if it's a little bit within that area. Thank you, Reggie.
Commissioner Stites has his hand up.
Commissioner Stites.
Stites, District 7. And I appreciate the comments from everyone there. I was not suggesting that we take all of those funded positions out. And I think that's kind of where, correct me if I'm wrong, where Commissioner Burrows was going. You know, I don't know in all my years at the police department that we were ever fully staffed. I don't know. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're carrying those 42 positions, maybe we're able to only carry 20, and maybe we're able to, shrink that down on the other side and only carry so many until we get to that location. I was not suggesting that we eliminate the full funding of positions, because yes, we do have to have them on the books and ready to go whenever we can get them hired. So I appreciate the exercise, and I've been made aware I learned a lot here listening to this, but I do think that that we could do this responsibly and not carry all of the funded positions, and then look at it again in 2 years and see if we need to make that adjustment and add another 20 spots to each side. Just a suggestion, and I appreciate the willingness to look at the 2% on the county side. I think it makes sense that when the tables were flipped back when the city was in better shape than the county, and I think it was 2017, 18, and 19, that they experienced a 2% mill reduction, 3 years in a row. And I think now that we're able to do that on the county side, I think 2% is doable. So I appreciate everybody's willingness to look at this. And I think it should not be forgotten that we're not talking about, I know I say Bonner Springs and Edwardsville a lot. A 2 mil reduction on the county side is for everyone in Wyandotte County, where back in 17, 18, and 19, it only affected KCK residents. Bonner Springs and Edwardsville didn't have the luxury of that mill reduction. And to Commissioner Davis's point, I still agree that we need to be having all taxing entities at the table, and we need to put pressure on them to be responsible with their mill increases or decreases. We are just a portion of the taxpayer dollars. We need everyone to participate and help get us where we need to be. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Commissioner McCarron.
Thank you. Commissioner Burrows mentioned essential employees a moment ago, and I need to educate myself, not at this meeting, but before the next meeting, about how we define that. Because I have a woman who emails me regularly and lets me know when our land bank lots need to be cut. And I would suggest that the person that cuts those lots is an essential employee from her perspective. And I would think that the person who has the stray dog in their neighborhood thinks that the animal control officer is an essential employee in terms of that particular incident. So I'm going to need to learn a little bit more about how we define that and how we move that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to double down on that, the point that we need to have this conversation with all taxing jurisdictions. I've been saying that, I believe, since I came into office, and to date, that to my knowledge has not happened. That conversation needs to be held, and I'm not willing to talk about lowering our 46% if the 60, whatever number it is going to hold the line, because it's just not giving our community the full benefit of a true meal reduction. We had an on-3 session a few weeks ago, and there were some slides that our staff had prepared, and I have been trying to find them and I can't find them, but they spoke to the reality that our tax base is not as taxed as many would believe, would suggest that it is. And when you compare it across communities throughout Kansas, our tax base is not as taxed as the other communities in the state of Kansas. And yet we continue to have this discussion about meal levy reduction. It wasn't until I came to City Hall that I was faced with the reality that you create a budget based off of expenses. Every other place that I've gone, in all of my professional experience, was that you base a budget based off of revenue and projected revenue. But here, we tend to base our budget off of how much we spend. And it just rubs me the wrong way to be having these kind of conversations. I don't think, again, a meal levy reduction, trying to figure out how many people we can or cannot cut, is the kind of climate in which we need to be having this discussion. To me, the discussion should be continued about how do we grow the economy in Wyandotte County. And when I think about discussions, we're going to have a proposal tonight. We're going to have some business that are going to talk about ideas tonight, so I'm told. The thing that gets me is that we talk about, also how many incentives we give to businesses that come in. If we don't have businesses coming into this community, we will not grow this community. Now, I'll talk about meal levy reduction if I can see that we're bringing in more business and these things, and they're saying that Wyandotte County is a place that I want to be, and we want them here. We say we want them here. I'll have that conversation about meal levy reduction. But when we're having a discussion about that in terms of how many people will cut in an environment such as we are today, it does not make sense. It does not compute to me why would we even having a conversation about meal levy reduction right now. It's not the time. As we continue to grow, we knew a few years ago that we were paying off the STAR bonds, as I recall. And that was bringing, loosening up some cash flow for our community. We made the decision then, 3 years in a row, to reduce the meal levy by two meals. And I remember the third year, I said, I think we're cutting pretty close to the bone here. I won't be talking about any more meal levy reductions going forward. And the next thing we know, we're in COVID. And so here we are now. And so again, there are too many unknowns and too many variables. We can talk about it and try to educate each other and this, that, and the other. But I'm telling you that the math is not mathing right now. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. I got a quick question. The tax entities, just to answer that question, the administrator's still working on that. That is not something that has not gone on unheard from this commission and myself. And it's a matter of scheduling, trying to get those entities together, the CFOs and the various non-elected folks to have that conversation. So that that is still on the table for the administrator to facilitate. I'd like to make a comment. Ms. Foundation, I believe you gave an estimate that the mill levy increase this year based on the valuations was about 8.5. Is that correct? A few months back? 8.5 mills?
No, that's not it. Yeah. It's one of your slides. You mean the revenue neutral rate?
It's the projected, the valuations went out and it went, I guess you gave an estimate that's saying based on the valuation increases across Wyandotte County, there's about 8.5 mil increase that you were projecting. Is that correct?
If the revenue neutral rate, is it still 8.5?
Around 9 months.
Okay.
So about 9 mils now. Okay. So, how much revenue is that we're projecting?
Well,
Increase, is that 15 million?
yeah, it's 15 million.
So that's an additional 15 million. I think Commissioner Burrows talked about that.
Across all the funds.
Across all the funds. I just want to make a statement that I do not support, and I would encourage this commission not to support any cuts in public safety, be it police, fire, sheriff, in any form or fashion, other than, and I kind of alluded to that conversation earlier, when you look at personnel, just looking at contractual services, commodities, and things of that nature outside of personnel to see if there could be cost savings. I know when I was on the police department, I had to do that. I had to determine what the priorities and the needs were, and maybe something that I had this year wasn't a priority, or something that I could push 2 or 3 years out. So I'm not advocating, and I don't advocate, and I really encourage this commission when we talk about these cuts. And I know Commissioner McKiernan mentioned, what does essential services mean? Well, every service that the unified government provides in some form or fashion, even these elected positions that we're here, are essential. I think the question is what are the basic services that define essential services? To me, that's police, fire, number one, as well as the sheriff's department, and all the supporting agencies and support that our courts, our criminal justice, because if we don't have a safe community, I've seen what happened with that when I got laid off in 1987, because Kansas City, Kansas was kind of in the same position of what we were told of going down a road that is not sustainable. I think the auditor mentioned it a few weeks back when he said that basically we're going bankrupt. That's what he indicated, and that if we don't do something drastic, his quote was "or else," and that just sticks in my head. So yes, hard decisions are going to have to be made. So one thing that was brought up, I know you kept talking about public safety positions that were funded. Are there any positions that aren't public safety that are funded as part of those numbers that you are giving as far as vacant positions?
So how we unfund and fund positions, it's a bank of positions. We don't choose certain positions and say they're unfunded. We're looking at a trend, and we know we have like a certain amount of positions that we have vacant and that we have funded. And as they come up, we fund those. So if it so happened, we do hire a public safety position and it goes against the trend, we may not be able to hire like another type of position.
Okay. So I guess I say that is just looking at that and then just line itemizing these department heads and seeing what types of goods and services outside of personnel can be cut when you talk about vendors, the commodities, maybe some of those wants, but maybe they're not needs that could be pushed back until our position looks better. I agree with Commissioner Johnson. The way out of this is economic development. I mean, that's the only way out because we've got to bring in more tax revenues. But on the flip side of this, I think at the beginning, Ms. Von Achen tried to present forth an option early on back in March and April of a way to do things to where you can offer some type of tax relief as well as a balanced budget without these drastic cuts. I don't know where that went, but we've got a different scenario now. All I know is that with an 8.5 mill levy increase and the letters that I get, and I'll read one because I want everybody to hear this. I get numerous calls, and some hard decisions have to be made. We've got to find a way to cut somewhere, and we've got to streamline our costs, or we're going down a road. I believe it was 2027. I didn't see that slide anywhere. It'd be nice if you put it back up to where our reserves go down. And I can just imagine by 2030, it wouldn't surprise me if this town is bankrupt. If the commission now and later, we don't do something. This is a letter from Mary E. Thompson, lives at 2820 North 109th Terrace. This isn't politics. This is a real person that lives here, that pays taxes. It says, "Dear Mayor Gunner, I'm a senior citizen and a resident of Piper in Western Wyandotte County, writing to protest the continued raising of property taxes in our area, which causes house payments to go up every year. I've been a resident of Kansas City, Kansas since 1986. My family and I moved to Piper in 1993 in hopes of a better education for our children. I've been in our house ever since. This is the home we were raised in our family and into which we have put a lot of time, money, and effort. We refinanced once to put in replacement windows and once to help with our kids' college expenses. Now that I'm retired and widowed, I would like to stay here, but it's becoming increasingly difficult due to steadily rising property taxes. Every year, they edge the payment up a little bit more because of tax increases. Not everyone in this area is rich, and some people believe, and most can't afford yearly tax hikes. Many of us have raised families here in Kansas City, Kansas, and have roots that go down deep here. I would hate to be forced to flee to other areas. However, if they keep pricing us out of our homes, we might have no choice. If the city can afford to give big tax breaks to businesses like the Speedway, they can afford to take care more about our citizens. Please don't let this part of town become an expensively packaged ghost town. Thank you for your attention." I heard Commissioner Johnson. I have a lot of respect for Commissioner Johnson and Pastor, and I respect his position, but I disagree. And here's why I disagree. Just because of this, we are headed into a recession. Times are hard. Yes, we do have to draw the line. But we're drawing the line on the backs of these residents when they don't have a lot of money to work with. We're saying we need to tighten our budget and we need to keep this money coming in, but we're doing it on the backs of the hardworking families and residents in Wyandotte County that still has one of the largest impoverished populations in the state of Kansas at 20%. We can't keep asking our residents year after year after year to keep paying our taxes, fees, and we haven't even talked about the pilot, which we need to talk about, and I encourage this commission to have a real conversation about. All those things impact our residents. Yes, hard decisions are going to be made. I suggest we do not touch, and you all define what is essential basic services. I suggest that you just don't touch public safety, because police and fire, I believe, and sheriff are the backbone of this community. If you don't have a safe community, you will not have a successful community. Everything predicates off of safety, in my opinion. But what I will say, you're going to have to cut something somewhere at some point with rising costs. Every employee that we hire, there's a cost associated with that employee. And every year those costs go up. And those are the highest costs. Am I correct, Ms. Von Achen, is personnel costs. At least those were the percentages that I've seen. In the past, that personnel costs make up the brunt of the unified government budget. Am I correct? I believe I am.
70% of the budget.
Yes. That's not sustainable. Somewhere, we're gonna have to take a hard look at this, and this commission, our future commissions and future mayors are gonna have to make a choice. I don't like kicking the can down the road. I just ask that this commission really define what essential and basic services are and really work together, 3-on-3s, behind the scenes, executive session. We've got an opportunity to really turn this thing around. When you have an auditor that comes in and tells the truth and gives a clear picture, which I've never heard before, about the true health of this county, and tells us that we're headed down a road of bankruptcy, that should be disturbing. So we can talk about keep raising taxes and bringing in this money and things of that nature to try and hold the line, but you're going to run people out. And the more people you run out of town, or the more people you tax into poverty, that's less of a tax base that you're going to have. And no business that I know of is going to want to come in the community unless you give them huge incentives just to be here, which adds no value, in my opinion, because they're not going to add anything to the tax rolls. So it goes right back to our residents. And they cannot continue to carry this burden, in my opinion. And so I just asked this commission, and I don't have all the answers, never claimed to. All I'm saying is I'm willing to work and do what I can with my team, work with you all, work with people probably way more talented, educated, and smarter than me on how to solve these problems. But let's come up with real solutions, because this current model that I've seen over my 32 years on the police department, and after I retired from the police department, has brought us to the point now where people are telling us we're going bankrupt. This is not sustainable. We have to change how we do business. You cannot continue to expect a different result doing the same exact things. And people are hurting. We're asking our residents to tighten their belt because of the economy. This unified government needs to lead the way and show that example. And we've just got to tighten our belt and cut costs. And that's my opinion. So thank you for your time. And I believe Commissioner Johnson had a.
Thank you. Well, Commissioner Davis had his hand up, but since my mind is not as, I don't hold as many thoughts as long as his young mind would, I would just ask for him just to allow me to cut in line if it's all possible.
Absolutely.
I had to jot down what I was going to say, Mayor. I will say this. I appreciate the fact that we can agree to disagree in a spirit of civility and not, go into, real negative verbiage. So I really appreciate that. My opinion is that I don't mind having a discussion about cutting costs. I look to your guidance as our leader, as our mayor, to show us where that might be, because I agree. I don't want to cut, public safety. I don't think there's anyone around this table that wants to do anything like that. But I need you or somebody to show me outside of public safety. And I haven't heard definitively what that could be, and specifically what those line items are. That gives me the comfort that we can do that. And again, I would say I'm willing to have that conversation, but not at the same time saying, and oh yeah, let's cut the mill levy. I just don't think that is responsible on our part as individuals. I still say that as relates to other communities in this state, we're one of the least taxed communities. Now I get that, and hey, I've got an elderly mother myself, and I have to try to look after her. So as I'm sentimental along those lines, but I think we have to be prudent in how we do this. So if we want to talk about lowering and tightening up our belt and finding those areas that we can cut, I'm willing to have that, but not at the same time as we talk about lowering the mill levy. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you. I'd argue if we say everything but public safety, we have conveyed to all of the other non-public safety departments that they are not essential, which I absolutely am against, because in my district, I hear about parks. I hear about whether or not if the concrete is chipping in Eisenhower Splash Park and folks want to cool off, they want to know that UG employees that may not fall under public safety will go out there and repair it. When they go to the DMV and we do not have enough employees to process car tags, they want to know that there's going to be folks there. When we have a cyber attack, right? And it costs us an exorbitant amount of money. Folks want to know that we have folks in IT that can back us up, because data security, in my opinion, is public safety. And so I'm not with the whole, let's just kind of only protect or just say public safety off the table. All of our departments are essential, union and non-union. That's how we maintain and improve the quality of life in this community. I have other elderly folks. I'll call her Mrs. H. I won't necessarily reveal her name, but I remember getting a call from her because Public Works, I know if Jeff Fisher and his team's in the room, did a phenomenal job repairing the street. And so, yes, I hear the call for a reduction in taxes and for tax relief, but I also hear the call for get these potholes filled, Commissioner Davis. I also hear the call for the maintenance of equipment for playgrounds is dangerous and I can't take my kid anywhere. I also hear the call for better services and amenities, which we have to reconcile during this budgeting process. I want to press on this idea that we can ask for a meeting with other taxing entities back in March, and somehow, some way, it still is taking time to make happen. Can someone, either Kathleen or Cheryl, can someone provide just some sort of clarity? We've been able to talk about a whole bunch of other things, but the one thing that I think everybody in this room agrees upon, which is we need to meet with them. And I don't think that is being echoed enough as a high enough priority. I'd rather us have staff focus on meeting with other entities and reporting to us what they're about to do than for us to entertain these ideas that have no political backing and will not pass if it's put on the agenda. So can someone provide me some clarity? Where are we with meeting with other taxing entities? If we care about cutting taxes, that is the most honest, transparent, and politically feasible way for us to do so. Can someone provide me with something? Cheryl, you have any thoughts?
Yes, actually, we had an opportunity, the finance staff coordinated with I think it was the CFOs to kind of find out what their thoughts were and where they were going to be with their mills. So we do have an update that we provided at a previous commission meeting in terms of what they were looking at mills. I'm not sure if Kathleen or if you have that update with you in terms of where the other jurisdictions were.
So I don't remember offhand, but I think Debbie might.
Yeah.
Debbie Johnsher, Deputy CFO. I don't think we have an update since the revenue neutral date passed to submit those. We had, I think, tried to call them and get some consensus before they were required to submit to the clerk. At that time, I don't think we had anybody that was increasing their mill. But I don't know. I don't have an update since then. We probably need to reach out to them.
Okay.
Again, or I don't know if the clerk can provide that information. I know everything was submitted to the clerk, but I don't know if that can be released or not. If that would have to come from the individual entities.
Okay.
So at the at the risk of sounding like I'm opining here, because finance just provides information. I think it would be very difficult to actually get all the elected officials of the other jurisdictions together in one room with all of you to talk about their own potential operational reductions. Just given, look tonight, how difficult it is to talk about our own just amongst ourselves. So this is what you're asking for in terms of having all the jurisdictions talk about their respective operations and reducing their mill rates to opposite of their interests, would be very challenging.
So if
I'm
I
just-
may ask, and Commissioner Bynum, Commissioner Johnson, please chime in. What would be helpful from us as other elected officials? What would be helpful for us to help you all get those answers? Would a letter be helpful? Would invitation? Should we just back off and maybe next week we can get some updates?
Well, we can get the answers to what they're planning to do. That's not a problem. It's the answers that you probably don't want to hear and that you might want to influence a reduction in their mills. That's the challenging part,
But that's fair. I
Yeah.
don't mind hearing that number and why.
Yeah.
And I don't care if it comes from the CFOs or not. And I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, go for it.
Yeah, comes from the clerk's
Okay,
office,
so
really.
I wouldn't
mean,
mind getting a report or that will let us know what direction they are going in general. Because one mill is representative of all of us as a community working in whatever fashion, as long as we understand there are certain things that, hey, they may not be willing to, there's reasons why, and it makes sense. Their budgets are what they are. I just want to have a better understanding of what their direction is as I'm contemplating what direction we should go. So that's
no, that's
But
good. And
I would like to add that I am, I go to this meeting that they do every 2 months for all the CFOs and such for government finance in Eastern Kansas. And we all share with each other. And I'd say a great majority of the other jurisdictions in the area, and Johnson County included, plan to do a mill reduction, just a marginal one or two.
Yeah.
2 was the most.
Oh, can you repeat that
reduction.
just a little bit louder?
That the other jurisdictions, just in general, are doing mill reductions, not big ones. 2 mills would be pretty big, but yeah.
They're doing something. Okay. But before I pass on the mic and thank you for that, if we can get, just so there's some progress here, Cheryl, can you commit to us getting an update from taxing jurisdictions this month before we adopt our budget and it's put on the agenda? Okay, that'll be very helpful because we've been talking about this for 5 months and it's gone nowhere. And I'd like for it to go somewhere. Thank you. I think Commissioner Ramirez is next.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you. In the span of time, I don't know if we will get to it, but I have an example of possible things we could look at. Cheryl, if you would allow me ask for permission to ask a couple questions to Chief Callahan.
Go ahead.
Chief, of your department, how many command staff do you have?
30.
30. And is
30, I'm sorry. 30.
you have 30 command staff?
That's correct.
Is that an NFP requirement to have that amount?
No, the 30 command staff, there's no requirement in the NFPA for command staff, but there is a requirement. Well, I don't want to say it's a requirement. There is a organizational flow in terms of ICS, which is the incident command system. I don't want to get too deep here, but give me 1 second. In terms of span of control, the optimal span of control is recognized as 5 individuals to 1 supervisor. The range is from 3 to 7 or 8. The fire department has 1 command staff member for every 14 non-command staff members.
Okay. And I'll scratch that last question. So to Cheryl, you've worked for other cities. Is that a rather large command staff for the type of the large department that we have in the city that they have to take care of? Is that a rather large command staff? Is that what some say the RUG is too top heavy?
We certainly can get you kind of what other similar jurisdictions would look at in terms of staff per capita. There are some numbers that we can give you that would be best practices that will share what that looks like. and how many people you need.
Okay, I would greatly appreciate that.
Okay.
Because I think 30 command staff, I've never been a firefighter. I don't know what it's like to operate within the fire department,
Mhm.
but I just think that's rather a lot. I would like to see.
We'll bring you
Johnson
something.
County, what other surrounding jurisdictions,
we'll bring
what
you.
the size of their command staff is like.
That's what we'll bring you, looking at command staff to employees so that you don't have command staff managing too few employees. So we can definitely bring you that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Commissioner Townsend has her hand up.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologize because I can only see, as I mentioned a couple hours ago, what's being put on the screen as part of the presentation. So currently I see this tax levy fund impact slide. Have we completed the entire presentation that was to be made tonight while we have experts in the room to explain the positions of the different various departments and options that were used, that were pursued?
To answer your question, Commissioner, in the interest of time, you can take it back to the slide with the options, please. With the 5, I believe it's 2, 5, and 10.
Well, and I mean, was that the end of the presentation?
No, not completely.
Okay. And the
But
reason I
here-
make that point is there are other people like me who may not be able to see this, and we have the entire presentation. I would like to see the entire presentation, as much as we can get through of it, done. So we have the benefit of the people who prepared it and move on with that. It's been a very interesting discussion thus far, and I do have a few comments. I'll try to make them quickly, and I'll start from some of the last points made with regard to the unified government's engagement with other taxing entities. This was a lesson I learned very early after my first budget back in 2013. We are the collecting arm for all these other entities, but we only control our mill levy. And the other part of what goes into tax rates, as was mentioned early on, is the assessed value of property. How do we control that? You know, those are market forces at work. And I guess one of the main ways we could control that is if we had more housing stock. So I'm more at this point leaning toward what Commissioner Johnson has says about, I'm looking at what it would take to get that general fund balance at 0 and not red ink, and maybe holding our current tax position steady until we can figure out how to staunch that red ink. And to that point, I don't think there should be any sacred cows with regard to not looking at where cuts may be needed or adjustments. I think, as Commissioner McKiernan said, if you have or live next door to a house that's got weeds 8 feet high, code enforcement or abatement team are essential. If your house is on fire, obviously, you know, the fire department is essential. If you need the police to show up, that's essential at the time. But I think we don't do ourselves any favors to hold any sacred cows as we go through this budget process. To that end, also, I'd still like to see the pie chart that shows where we are spending by department most of our money. And I can get a copy of what we used to show in the budget. Going to Commissioner Markley's point, I think we have to be more strategic, maybe not 2%, 3%, 10% cuts just across the board. Every dollar is not necessarily the same for each of these departments. So I think we need to be more strategic. But I would like to see if we can go through the remainder of the presentation while we have the professionals in the room to explain it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Townsend. In the interest of time, the request from our administrator is that she'd like to really put some guardrails up for this commission so staff can have clarity as a result of this robust, good discussion that needs to be had by this commission. So I'm going to turn it over to her so she can kind of get some clarity on where she needs to move staff in relation to the will of the commission. So.
Thank you, Mayor. Interim County Administrator Cheryl Harrison Lee. So I would like to get somewhat of a straw poll from the commission and get your feedback on what you'd like us to consider. That will guide us with some direction on what to bring back in terms of the areas that we should look at to cut to be able to accomplish your goals. So this is presented with somewhat of a cafeteria format. First, option A, and it's city on the top line, then county, and then basically being able to sustain on the third line. So I'll start at the top with the city general fund. If you were to look at a 2.5% reduction, that would get you to pretty much not having a structural deficit as you go into the budget. It's about $2,000. We would call that pretty close to even. We think we could make that up. So the 2.5% reduction would pretty much close the gap for you on the city side. If you went to 5% reduction, then you would have some additional revenue to put into your reserves. So I would ask your feedback on whether you would like to go with one of those options to pretty much close the gap and not move forward with a deficit. When you look at the county mills and the county general fund, what we've heard from our CFO is that we are able to do 2 mills and that she believes it's sustainable to be able to do that. If we go with 2 mills, the other thing that we've offered is that your reserves, your requirement is that you would have 17%. You could maintain 17, or you could go a little bit stronger to 3% so that you have some additional funds to be able to look in the future at some of the things that you've had conversations about in terms of parks and code enforcement and other infrastructure. If you went stronger, then you have the opportunity to be able to have additional revenue. So what we're hoping is that we get your feedback on an option from the gold line, an option from the orange, so that we can come back with you. We also have that the finance team has worked on your scoring of your low performing priorities. We have the ability to bring that back to you after you look at some numbers to see what programs are low performing that you've already ranked previously. To look at how we might capture the funds for a 2 or 4 meal or 2.5, or if you'd like to move forward with what we presented last week. So I'm interested in kind of a straw poll and understanding how and what to bring you back next meeting. Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison Lee. I'm going to use better verbiage. Absolutely not on any of the gold. I would entertain option D.
Thank you.
Who else has a comment to make? Oh, some of us aren't ready to pick anything. I would say option D with an additional look at using $1 million in county reserves to offset the loss to $2 million. Commissioner Markley, or yes.
I don't have any interest in any of the gold line. I would I would entertain option D, but I'm actually fine with the administrator's budget as proposed.
Commissioner Davis.
Did we talk about option F? Like, was that presented to us?
So option F would basically be looking at if you went beyond those amounts, trying to have additional funding for the priorities that you identified, which would be parks, additional funding for infrastructure, looking at workforce innovation,
And some of the other ones kind
Some of the other priorities, yes.
So I am for option D. However, I do think, and I'm going to kind of cheat here. I do think that in the proposed budget, there may be some cost savings. I would like the cost savings, if we can hold the line at 2 mil, to go into investing in our priorities as identified by us as commissioners. So option D, with looking at the budget to invest in other priorities if we can.
Perfect. So that's option D, with then looking at option F, which is strategic reinvestment into your priorities.
Yes.
Okay.
Other commissioners? Commissioner Stites or Townsend online, are you seeing what we're doing and want to participate?
This is Commissioner Townsend, District 1. I'm seeing it. Can't say I totally understand what these options are. I didn't know if we were supposed to pick one in each line.
You can.
Or what? Okay.
If you want to, you can.
I'm going to have a more in-depth discussion tomorrow about the budget and incorporate some of these. I'm not sure that I'm, without that discussion, prepared to say affirmatively anything yet. I am concerned about discussing meal rate reductions before I know how we are going to at least get to zero or a couple of $1,000s difference on the bottom line of the general budget. That's my focus right now.
Okay.
The reduction, again, that pie chart would help me because it would be difficult to equate some of the smaller departments we have in terms of their budget with, say, public safety budgets. So I want to see where the percentages of each dollar that we have to spend in our tax dollar as the UG, where is that going? So that's all I could say at this time. I'm concerned about getting rid of the red ink before we talk mill reduction discussion. That's my focus and concern right now.
And Commissioner Stites, anything from you?
Well, yes. And here's the problem with the gold across the top is I know that there's departments that they can't do 2.5, 5, 10. They can't do 1. But I know that there's departments that can exceed the 10. So it makes it tough to do a straight across the board reduction. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the way that Commissioner Davis stated, that any savings that we can identify, and I'll get it wrong, but I think we can still look at departments and how we can identify savings. I'm glad that we are looking at the two mills. I personally believe that that is the bare minimum that we should be looking at. I go back to Edwardsville, 6 years. I was told, oh, we can't lower the mill. We can't lower the mill because you know what? We're just part of the taxing entity, and it only makes a little bit of difference. Well, 2 weeks ago, Sunday, I was sitting in a restaurant in Bonner Springs, talking with some constituents that are on Social Security. And they said, Commissioner, our pay doesn't go up, but yet our taxes continue to go up. We don't have the ability to go get a raise or get any more money on our Social Security. So every dollar, and this is what I was told in Edwardsville, oh, it's just $5, it's $10, it's $20, a small reduction. Any amount that gentleman can save was the difference of him being able to potentially buy his medication that's needed, go see his grandkids put gas in his car. So we have seen unprecedented land value growth, assessed value went up. And when we sit and think that we're going to talk about, we can't see a mill reduction on the county side when we just went up 13%. I don't understand the logic behind that. I'm glad we're talking about 2% or 2 mil, but it definitely could be more. And I'm on board with the D, but it's frustrating to me because I think there's a whole lot more room, and that we owe it to the taxpayers that have suffered and continued to pay the high taxes. And we have told them year after year after year that as soon as this project pays off, your taxes are going to be reduced. Well, it just has never happened. I also want to see Bonner Springs and Edwardsville lifted out of the pilot. They should not be paying a pilot that goes into a Kansas City, Kansas general fund. So I'm in favor of 2, looking at how we can identify savings in the gold and releasing Bonner Springs and Edwardsville out of the pilot program. And that's all.
Thank you. Commissioner McKiernan?
Thank you. Commissioner Stites, I had somebody say to me the other day that there was concern that their Social Security was fixed and not going up. And so being a member of AARP, I looked it up on the AARP website. And it says the inflation gauge used by the Social Security Administration to set the annual COLA came in at 9.1% for July, the first of 3 months the agency uses to determine what I am a member. Slated to be announced by October. Quote, it is not possible to be precise until we see the data for the next 2 months, but it's probably safe to say that at this point we can expect a COLA in the 8 to 10% range, says David Sertner, Legislative Counsel and Director of Legislative Policy for Government Affairs at AARP. That would be the biggest increase since 1981 when the COLA was 11.2%. And the only reason I looked that up was because I got the very same thing said to me. And so, as I always do, I went looking for some data to tell me where things lie. And so I came up with that. In response to Commissioner Bynum's question, Ms. Harrison Lee's question, D is fine with me. I have no problem with that at all. I do think we can still make targeted reductions. We're too late in the game to do it now. But if we were to actually go bottom up rather than top down with some of our decision making, I'm betting a whole bunch of people sitting in this room could come up with a whole bunch of ways that we could improve our efficiency, that we could cut our costs, that we could do the same things better than we've ever done before. And maybe, you know what? Maybe I need to shut up and just say to these folks sitting here, you know what? Make magic happen.
Commissioner Townsend has her hand up.
Commissioner Townsend. Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Talking about the mill and the cutting goes back to the ask, I think, of Commissioner Davis of our interim administrator. When or was there a commitment to a particular date certain that this body would have an idea of where the mill levies for the other taxing entities would lie? And knowing what they're going to do is critical. We may not have any sway over it, but the very types of reductions that we're talking about may not be seen. I can't stress that enough to our inconstituents, if those other taxing entities raise their mill levy. I mean, we've been down this road before. So we can reduce our mill levy and still the check that our constituents write for taxes is higher than the year before. So to have some idea of what the other taxing entities would do, I think would shed some light on another option for us as well. Is there any way we can know before we take final action what they're going to do? And I don't mean the day we're actually in the resolution phase of it, of the budget.
Yeah.
My guess is no. I'm guessing we.
Interim County Administrator Cheryl Harrison Lee. Yes, we have some information on that. ACA Dykler.
Thank you, Cheryl. Brett Dykler, Interim Assistant County Administrator. And to the commissioners, yes, we, the Unified Government Clerk, have information that from the taxing entities that would show what their intent would be, albeit they don't have their budgets collectively adopted yet either, which is something we won't know. But the only thing we would know at this point, which we can produce for you, would be their intent, whether that may be to stay revenue neutral versus saying our maximum mill levy that they would have published would have been X, and that would tell you kind of how you could plug that in to look at independent tax bills across different housing areas to get to a total. So not knowing if they're going to take, we do know what their maximum is going to be, but they may also reduce those by through the budget process as well. But we can certainly supply that information if you need that, and that'd be very helpful. And thank you.
Thank you. Do we know if they have a drop dead date, I guess, as we do, for declaring what that's going to be? I guess, is that the day they accept it or what? But just to know where they are right now, I would find helpful if we can get that circulated.
Commissioner, and yes, based on the July 20th submittals, which was the new deadline for them to submit to the Unified Government Clerk their intent, we can produce that number for you. Now, keep in mind that each jurisdiction has the option to adopt a hearing date between August 20th and September 20th with the intent to certify their budget by the end of September or October 1. That's the difference between those dates.
Okay, well, I would appreciate if we could at least circulate right now where they are, so we have some idea. I understand what you're saying, that could change, but I'm just wondering if there's any salvation there when we're talking about cutting taxes, because as I said, whether we stay where we are or reduce, the travesty would be that our taxpayers don't see the bottom line dollar increase that they want to see. Thank you.
Commissioner, one additional, if I may, Mayor, one additional comment to that, the revenue neutral notices by jurisdiction to all Wyandotte County taxpayers has actually been mailed. So to meet the deadlines for just our portion, we included a comprehensive snapshot of all jurisdictions that affect each taxpayer by their tax bill. And those have been mailed already physically.
Thank you. I believe some constituents have said they've already got them, got notification. So Commissioner Johnson and then Commissioner Ramirez. I get
hand raised.
Well, I guess. Well, the administrator raised your hand for you.
Oh, you want to put me on the spot. Remind me, because I was going to ask you later on, but go ahead and remind me about option F and option G.
So option G was what we presented last week, which had a $500,000 reduction. Option F would be for you to look at additional revenue to reinvest, to do some strategic reinvestment in those areas that were identified as your priorities through the community survey, as well as from the commission.
That was G and F.
G was what was presented to you last week.
That's a no.
$500,000 reduction.
Okay, that's a no. F is what? Say it again.
Well, F would be an investment, and you would need some kind of meal reduction to be able to have additional revenue to do strategic investment in infrastructure, in parks, in innovation and resiliency.
When you say a reduction in mill levy, to me, that means it's a reallocation of funds. No, yes?
Well, no, you would need some additional funds to be able to do that.
Okay.
So you could, if you're looking for the option with what I heard from you earlier of zero meal reduction, then it would be option H that says no meal reduction, which is not on there. That would be your new option. That's your new blue.
H as in Harold.
Yes. I've got you. Option H.
Thank you. Commissioner Ramirez, you had a question?
Yeah, just a very quick statement. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We would be remiss. I want to thank the staff who came here today. I'm not gonna lie, some of you think this was a waste of time since you guys didn't get to talk and present. But as Commissioner McKiernan alluded to it, if within your own individual department, you have ideas of those efficiencies, if you have ideas of where you can cut those costs, come to me, come to us. My door is always open. Jeff, I know I need to call you. But my door is always open. I want to provide that 2 mil reduction, but also find those efficiencies where we can reinvest. I and other commissioners worked along with public works staff to come up with the strategic outcomes and strategies of how we can better our infrastructure. We need to put more into our infrastructure. We need to put more into our parks. We need to put more, especially in our IT. We just got out of a cyber attack. But again, strategically, do it incrementally, strategically. So I apologize to the staff who have been here. Thank you for your hard work, your dedication, and the sacrifice you provide to this government and to this city. It does not go unnoticed. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And in the interest of time, Commissioner Davis will be our last question for the evening.
Okay, so we're not showing up 3 o'clock, August 25th, correct?
No, we've got some really good feedback. So now we're going to work on option D. And we will bring you some areas and show you where you can see those reductions. We'll be working with the staff to get that.
Okay, great, because I would love for us
So
to,
this straw poll, your recommendation of getting the straw poll today and getting your insight on the straw poll was very helpful. So thank you.
okay, absolutely. And thank you so much. So for departments, you don't have to figure out how to cut. And I just want to echo Commissioner Ramirez. We appreciate the work all of you do because you are all essential. And I hope us derailing this conversation has showed you how essential you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. I'd like to echo our administrator as well as the commission. Thank you to staff. Thank you to this commission for having a really robust professional, as well as Commissioner Johnson indicated too, a lot of disagreements, but you all came to something you could agree on without being disagreeable. And so thank you all so much. Thank you, staff, for the work that you do. And to the public that may be watching, this conversation will continue moving forward. And so stay tuned. At this time, we are going to adjourn to go into our full commission meeting that will be held in the commission chambers. It will start about 5 minutes late, so staff can set up the equipment. And at this time, I'll join this special session. And do I have a motion?
Markley, second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Johnson,
Aye.
Markley,
Aye.
Dietz,
Aye.
Davis,
Aye.
Bynum, Burrows.
Aye.
Townsend. Commissioner Townsend. Aye. McKiernan.
Aye.
Ramirez.
Aye.
Vote is not 8-0. The motion carries.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.